I like to say hello and welcome you, good day, that is my name.
Hello, ladies, gentlemen, and comrades against the binary. I am Sorio99, and welcome to the 2021 Game Awards. No, not Jeff's one. We don't have 20 ad breaks or a dozen so-called world premieres that everybody already read about online. No, we just have a few different awards to hand out to some of my favorite games. And unlike other award shows with quirky names for their awards, I actually intend to reuse these awards next year. Assuming I still have a YouTube channel by then. Oh, and yes, I'm kind of ripping off NerdCube's format, but to be fair, we're both kind of ripping off the Oscars, and also he didn't mention half the games I want to talk about. The bastard! First up today, we have the Ghostbusters 2 award, which goes to the most fitting sequel of the year. Now, by fitting, I don't necessarily mean the best sequel, so don't go yelling at me for not putting Persona Classic 5 on here. This is simply the sequel that most lives up to and most closely resembles the original, without being exactly the same game, just again. And the winner is... Subnautica Below Zero. Subnautica was surprisingly different from most survival crafting games, and not just because 90% of it was spent in the water. It prioritizes base building and storytelling more than survival mechanics like hunger. It uses the varied aquatic creatures you run into around the map as not only your main resources and your main opposition, but also as an integral part of the world and its aesthetic. And it is both breathtaking and horrifying. I love Subnautica, to the point where my first ever Twitch stream that is now lost to the sands of time was about the original Subnautica. And while some could argue Below Zero is much more of an expansion to the original than a true sequel, I loved it for how it expanded on what the first established while also changing certain things up. The introduction of needing to deal with the cold when above ground made the sections on land feel just as intense and resource-based as exploring underwater. The expanded story is a joy and takes much more advantage of a lot of the ideas the first game introduced. Brand new creatures, a brand new map, it is still very much Subnautica at the end of the day, but that is absolutely not a bad thing. Well, mostly. If there is one thing holding it back from being higher up in my personal ranking, it's definitely that there just isn't enough new to separate it from the original in my mind. Sure, it is very different, and I love the differences, but the moment-to-moment gameplay is very similar to the first one. And while the new environments introduced help with that somewhat, it's still very much the same thing. But hey, if you liked Subnautica, you'll probably like Below Zero. I know I did. Next up, we have the Ghostbusters 1 award. This goes to the best game, the highest quality game that I can recommend that I actually haven't played, at least all that much. Now, how can I recommend a game I've barely played? Well, there are two criteria. I have to have at least tried it or played a game in the same series, and I have to have watched someone else play through, so I know what the whole package includes. And believe it or not, there are probably more nominees than you'd think. And the winner is... Psychonauts 2! Psychonauts 2 is a game that I very much want to play through all the way. I've played through the original Psychonauts 100%. I even beat Meat Circus 100% on my first try without losing a life. Though, admittedly, this was this year on the Steam version, so not as difficult as the original. I did this specifically before the sequel released because I was genuinely interested in it. Unfortunately, I only beat Psychonauts on September 16th, and the next day was when the next chapter of Deltarune released, and then after I beat that, there was the Nintendo Direct, and then WarioWare came out, and then Metroid Dread, and yeah, I just haven't gotten around to it yet. However, while I was playing through the original Psychonauts, I was watching a Let's Play of Psychonauts 2 on Twitch and YouTube, and I honestly love everything I've seen. I have played through the first level, so I can confirm the controls and gameplay feel just as good, if not loads better than the original, feeling a little less floaty, but a lot faster and super satisfying. Especially comparing the two games' combat, the sequel is head and shoulders above the original. That goes for the visuals too. My god, this game is beautiful. The original is amazing, of course. It has enough style and flair that even nowadays it looks good. Here, though, they managed to take full advantage of modern hardware and make a game that matches its style with just looking gorgeous. If I had to nitpick the graphics, I'd say some of the character design is less unique than in the original game, which admittedly might be because some of the characters from the first that made it over look kinda weird in the new engine and style, but neither of these detract from how amazing this game looks. And as for the story, I don't want to spoil anything, but this game brings back all the amazing and wonderful writing of the original, with more polish, experience, and even some improvements in terms of just awareness. All woven into a story that manages to act as a brilliant successor to the original. I love this game already. Imagine how much more I'll love it once I play past level 2. Our next award is the award-winning Cartoon Award for the best game to watch. This is an early access title that shows tremendous promise, a game that should be coming out in the not too distant future that either is worth playing through for hours right now or is guaranteed to be when it comes out. And again, that's the not too distant future, so I'm sorry, but Deltarune is disqualified for this year because there is no way that thing's coming out until late 2023 at the earliest. And the winner is... Teardown. Teardown is basically a complete game already. Technically, it received its first public release late last year, but all through 2021, it has received updates. At first, it was just things like bug fixes, optimizations, bringing experimental features like the level editor to the main branch. Then it was more major additions, a brand new level to play, adjustable difficulty, the ability to change the weather in sandbox mode. All of this was added on top of the already beefy campaign, based around one of the most unique gameplay loops I've ever seen. Teardown is essentially a heist simulator, set in a game engine built on voxels in which almost every object you can see and interact with is destructible. Need to get through a fence? Just grab your sledgehammer and break it down. A locked door giving you trouble? Pull out your blowtorch and burn off the door. Feel like things would go so much smoother if that brick wall wasn't blocking your path? Grab a shotgun or an explosive and suddenly the wall isn't there anymore. With objectives based around either destroying things or grabbing certain objects in a time limit or bringing objects over to your truck in time, the game was incredible and varied and complicated and oh so fun. I say it was that because just in December, they added an entire new campaign's worth of challenges, brand new levels and tools, and entirely new mechanics, including fucking robots that will hunt you down from the moment they see you. Not only that, but because they added workshop support, there are functionally infinite different possible levels and mechanics to play with. Someone straight up built a plane flying through the air that you could fully walk around, complete with simulating depressurization if you open one of the doors while in flight. This is an indie game that isn't even out yet that holds more content and worth than several AAA releases. By the time this actually comes out, I expect the creators will have somehow cracked the cure for cancer and how to achieve world peace, and they'll poke both out for a few bucks because they still need to spell check them. Honorable mention, by the way, to Blade and Sorcery, one of the most fun VR games I regularly play, but 100% still in an early form and needs a lot of work before it can be considered complete. Speaking of VR games, next up is the First World Privilege Award for the Best VR Game of the Year. Pretty self-explanatory, but it should be noted that I play primarily on the Valve Index with the Index controllers, which may sway my decision making. And the winner is... I Expect You to Die 2, The Spy and the Liar. I Expect You to Die was one of those games that truly got VR. It was originally released in 2017, but got its last big content update in 2019, and ended with a good 7 levels to its name. The series, as indicated by the name, is based around James Bond-esque spy missions, all taking place within a small area. Each level has you in one place, and at your disposal are whatever spy gadgets you manage to bring with you, and your cybernetic telekinesis, which lets you interact with your surroundings. It's almost a puzzle game, with each mission asking you to foil the plans of the evil organization Zaraxis, and many times find a way to make it safely back to your agency. The first game was incredible, each level acting almost like standalone episodes of a spy-based TV show. First, you invade a plane and steal a supercar, then you stop a dirty bomb trying to gas a city, you escape a submarine, you invade a mansion. It was tons of fun. The Spy and the Liar, meanwhile, takes the foundation the first game established and makes it one big, exciting adventure. The story of each mission leads into the next, giving a lot more world building, and for the first time in the series, actual human beings that we can see and interact with. I almost don't want to spoil either the puzzles or the story, even though this, more than any other game in this video, is going to be so difficult for you all to play. But trust me, they are both so worth the fee for entry. Also, oh my god, that intro song? How do Shell Games do it? Next on our list, we have the Driving Down the Highway Award, for the game I loved so much despite absolutely sucking at it. I love driving. I have driven for hours to my state's border just for fun, but I have gotten more flat tires in my time than I've had tires, period. And I've gotten in 2 car accidents that, while my car survived them, were so bad I had panic attacks while still in the car. This award is for the game that causes me as much stress and as much pain that I love nonetheless. And the winner is... Super Monkey Ball Banana Mania. I love puzzle games. I have multiple games on my iPhone that are literally just 10 grams, but the pieces can be all different shapes and sizes. I played through the entire Professor Layton series from Curious Village all the way to Millionaire's Conspiracy, partially because that was my happy place after my first serious breakup. Monkey Ball is, at its heart, a puzzle game, with one very simple setup for each puzzle. Get your ball into a goal within 60 seconds or less. You can move and rotate the world around your monkey, and you will die. You will let your monkey, or your hedgehog, or your van, or even your Sega brand console fall into an infinite abyss, or a soup, or the stomach acid of a whale. Super Monkey Ball has always been an absolute bastard, and this game is no different. The best part is, it always feels like your fault. You can rage and bitch and moan all you like, but at the end of the day, you just have to get better. You can always beat it, you just have to keep trying. Of course, this being a remake of Super Monkey Ball Deluxe, it has some of the best level design in the whole series, the 12 best party games to be included in Monkey Ball history, and the best gameplay in the franchise, just with tons of quality of life tweaks and minor alterations. This is an incredible game. The only problem is, it's still Monkey Ball, meaning it's still one of the most brutally difficult games you can play. So I can't say I've played through the whole thing, obviously, but I love it. But I suck at it, but it's great. I'm just bad. Next, we have our penultimate award, the Lightly Salted Quaker's Rice Cake Award for the best game that I loved that the majority of people just straight up didn't care about. Like most things I eat, some people love it just as much as I do, but fact is, the world as a whole simply does not care about it. If you love it, I hope we can relate in how unique and quirky we are. And the winner is... Miitopia for Nintendo Switch. You can play as a literature arts textbook and beat up your abusive father. It's an in-depth RPG where 95% of what happens is complete RNG, and you can make Joseph Stalin and George Orwell sleep in the same hotel room if you want. Why is this so damn niche? Okay, look, Miitopia isn't a standard RPG. It's a strategy game, mixed with an interactive Mad Libs. You directly control your player character, and that's it! So, how do you help your other party members? Simple. You manage their stats outside of battle, either by feeding them stat-boosting food or giving them better equipment, and you give them sprinkles, which function as your health and magic potions. If you put different characters together, you boost their relationship, which gives them better abilities when they're in battle together. And as for the Miis, you can make the NPCs and player characters literally anyone you can imagine. You can create stories with connections the game could never have anticipated, or just make everyone look incredibly stupid. The Switch version is the definitive version, but even if you get this game on 3DS, it's incredibly worth your time. Seriously, you need to play this game at least once. At least try out the demo if you're worried you won't like it. And that brings us to our final award, the Game of the Year award. Keep in mind, this is my personal choice for Game of the Year. Not necessarily the absolute best game that came out, just my favorite game that I actually played through. And the winner is... Metroid Dread, because what else could it be? The first original main Metroid game since Other M back in 2010, the first original 2D Metroid game since Metroid Fusion back in 2002, and while more or less every other Nintendo franchise was going through a 2D renaissance, Metroid got either a first-person shooter interquels, the worst story in the series, or a spin-off that nobody asked for. The first ray of hope the series got was in 2017, when Metroid 2 for the Game Boy was made from the ground up for the 3DS. Samus Returns was a great game that showed tons of potential, but the problem was, it was held back by the limitations of the original game and had a few of its own little nitpicks to deal with. Plus, it was a remake, and it came out to Nintendo sending a takedown to the makers of the seemingly stellar AM2R, so it was doomed to negative reception basically out of the game. Metroid Dread, however, was the genuine sequel to Metroid Fusion, and it was made by the same team that made Samus Returns, who genuinely took the criticism of Samus Returns to heart. So, how do I sum up what this game is? Let me tell you a story. About a third of the way through the game, you meet a member of the Chozo race, one of the first living Chozo we've ever seen in a game. They give you the most story in the game we've got to this point, and logically speaking, it is a complete pace killer. It stops the gameplay in its tracks to give obvious exposition about the big bad of the game and how it all connects to Samus. And yet, throughout the whole scene, I was sitting there enthralled. I loved everything I was seeing and hearing, especially when we heard, for the first time ever, Samus Aran speak in the Chozo language. This was the best cutscene I had ever seen. And then, the Chozo is killed, suddenly and mercilessly, by a soldier of the big bad. Suddenly, I was thrown into what could probably be classified as a mini-boss, and yet it was the first boss that I genuinely struggled with. I kept trying and doing all I could, but I could not get the hang of the enemy's AI or really dodge their attack patterns. Then, I realized something. One of the abilities I had gotten earlier in the game, the Flash Step ability, was initially presented as a very situational, context-sensitive problem solver. It had its uses to be sure, but it didn't feel like a core part of Samus' moveset. Then, at this fight, I realized its real use. Against enemies with fast-hitting attacks, Flash stepping away is the best method of dodging imaginable. With this move, combat was fast, frenetic, with dodges, counters, and shots all being woven together in sequences that made me feel like a master for pulling them off. That's the thing that makes Metroid Dread stand out. It's not its difficulty, or its level design, or even its frankly beautiful graphics. What makes Metroid Dread my game of the year is how it feels to play. The platforming is the best it has ever been, combining the polish of Samus Returns with the interconnected nature of Super Metroid and the brilliant design of Metroid Fusion. Each button has its use in gameplay, be it a special ability, equipping different weapons, or even things you can't imagine being used, and they managed to map all the buttons perfectly for how they need to be used. The combat, I've already mentioned, is incredible, with the improved counter from Samus Returns and using abilities you would never imagine out of combat uses, as well as abilities that change combat completely once you unlock them. And this isn't even getting into the enemy sections, taking the idea of being hunted by a dangerous predator from Metroid Fusion and giving it the freedom and threat of something like Mr. X from the Resident Evil 2 remake. Outside of your first encounter with each enemy, your time with them isn't scripted. If you keep dying to them over and over again, it's because you're missing something, and like with Monkey Ball, you just need to get better at the game. The time you spend in the enemy zones is tense and heart-pounding, the bosses are brutal and challenging, and the exploration and platforming is more fun than it has ever been before. How could Metroid Dread not be my game of the year? But what was your game of the year? Did any of your favorites make it on the list, or did you storm down to the comments when I called Shin Megami Tensei Persona a classic? Leave your thoughts down below, and thank you for watching.